Well, thank you, Samuel Doten, for helping put on these conventions where everyone has such a miserable time. No fun is had. They're awful. Everyone hates them.
You not having fun, John?
I'm having fun, but I understand what a sick, sad person I am, that I enjoy
Yeah,
it.
we're all sickos here at Minneapolis DFL.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay, we're back on the Wedge Live podcast with a two-parter. I didn't intend for the Ward 10 convention to inspire multiple harrowing stories. I don't know if we're putting these episodes together in one. I talked to Dex Anderson earlier. I'm your host, John Edwards. Sam Doten is my guest. Thank you for telling your harrowing personal story.
Thank you for listening to my harrowing personal story. I really appreciate it.
So last Saturday, the Ward 10 DFL convention. These are political conventions where city council candidates are vying for the endorsement of the DFL political party. And we have 13 of them in Minneapolis. And for some reason, Ward 10 is always angrier than all the rest. And Sam, what was your role at that convention?
I had a couple roles with the convention. Leading up to the convention, I was one of the primary planners of the convention. So I was the Ward 10 committee vice chair. As part of that, we did things like reserve the booking, do a site visit, arrange all of the details for caucus night, book caucus night locations, get together the credentials and rules and arrangements committee and make sure that the right folks were in the right places so that we could have a convention in the first place. And then at the Ward 10 convention on Saturday, May 31st, my role was, again, I also had a couple different roles. I feel like I have a stack of hats reaching up higher than Dill Dimmadome. And my chief role, though, however, was being the head sergeant at arms at the Ward 10 convention.
So on the day of the convention, what kinds of stuff were you doing? What did you see? Because I saw a guy saying F off as you tried to remove him from the convention.
Yes, this individual said F off I'll back up a little bit. So tensions and sparks were flying at this convention throughout. Before the convention even began, there was one person who, to my understanding, was not even a delegate, who was kicked out because, from what I heard, and I did not witness this to be clear, he shoved or pushed or otherwise put his hands on Councilwoman Aisha Chugtai. So that was before we got even started. During the convention, there was another delegate who I did kick out because I'd given him a warning about waving the sign while Aisha was speaking. And I said, you need to not do that. And part of this was I was being pretty strict about enforcing rules around decorum, about respectful treatment throughout the day. We all, I'm sure your listeners know the events of 2 years ago at the Ward 10 convention, which ended in a riot. And I was determined not to have a repeat of that. And so I would, if it was a minor infraction, I would give someone one warning. And if it was repeated, they were out. But if it was a moderate or severe infraction, there would be no warnings. I would instruct them to leave at that point. So that's the background. And then we got to the point, I think it was around the time we were going to take the first ballot for endorsement. And we were having some numbers. We were working on the credentials report and making sure that we had every delegate accounted for, every upgraded alternate accounted for, so that we were distributing the right number of ballots on the floor, not too few, not too many. And while we were figuring that out, a delegate got up to the microphone and was kind of berating the chair of the convention, Ann Friedrich, saying, "Do your job," and some other things. I was on the other side of the auditorium at this point, so I started walking in that direction. And this delegate, his name is Steve Prince, he walked away from the microphone, but then continued to shout at the folks on the stage. And if anyone was shouting at the stage and not using a microphone to seek recognition, I told them they needed to cut it out. They needed to stop. That's not acceptable. So I walked up to Steve and I said, "Steve, you need to chill out. Please calm down. Take a seat," something like that. And then he said to me, and keep in mind, this man is about a full foot taller than me.
He's a large man. Yeah.
He's a large man. You know, he has an imposing presence. And he said, "You need to..." Wait, can I swear on your podcast, John?
Yes, go. Do it.
Okay. He said, "And you need to fuck off." And I said, "You've crossed a line. You're done. You need to go."
You help out at a lot of conventions. You're doing various things. You're not just helping at the Ward 10 convention where you are a resident of Ward 10. You're helping at a lot of conventions. And we took a break from conventions in Minneapolis for a while. I have some like pre-COVID experience at conventions in like 2017. But like Ward 10 this year, even though there was no riot, as you described the last one, the storming of the stage in 2023, where you were the chair swinging your gavel, trying to keep us safe with just a gavel to defend us.
Yeah, I found out how useless that was after that.
But like this year's convention didn't feel normal to me. Like the vibe was kind of angry.
No.
Like I come to immediately after arriving, there's a guy in my precinct who's just jawing at people in 10-1 and like just messing with I Should Chug Tie's lid and like snapping at people. He just seemed really agitated.
I'm sure I know who you're talking about. I was notified early on in the convention that there was someone stealing literature. I found this person. I said, "Are you doing this?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I don't like it." And I said, "You need to stop. You need to leave that alone."
Right. And then a couple of minutes later, this is before it's even begun. It's still registration time, as you mentioned. People are texting me about how they saw a council member Chug Tie get shoved or shoulder checked in the hall. And there was like an angry vibe that I don't see when I go to other conventions in the city where people are passionate about who they support. But like, I don't know, people were pissed off in Ward 2, for example, but I never felt like somebody's about to put their hands on someone at the Ward 2 convention. It was just like normal, I'm real mad at these people kind of angry, not I might explode at them and do something physical kind of angry at Ward 10. And the way I kind of tell myself and explain it is maybe Ward 10 is just so diverse. Like Whittier and East Pidayma-Kaska are so different, they cannot coexist in the same ward. And it's just more volatile than other places, but I don't know.
You know, there were, and this is true at a lot of conventions, there's a large number of first-time delegates. For many people, this is the most access they've ever had to have any influence or voice in our political systems, including the DFL endorsement process, which is very powerful. It's very valuable. There's a reason that nearly every candidate running for any office in the city of Minneapolis seeks DFL endorsement because it is influential. You know, this is a city that votes 80+% for DFL candidates in general elections. And, you know, if we were more of a swing district, I don't think the dynamics would be the same, because wherever you are on the political spectrum in Minneapolis, whether you are a socialist and far on the left, whether you are a mainstream liberal, whether you are a more centrist or moderate or independent voter, or whether you consistently vote for Republicans, being a delegate at a DFL convention gives you a lot more voice in our political system than just voting in November in a ranked choice voting election. I want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not especially, because as you point out, John, there's a lot of diversity and diverse viewpoints in political opinion and identity, but in political opinion at these conventions. And also the stakes are very high for Ward 10. One, Councilwoman Aisha Chugtai is vice president of the city council. In many ways, she is a symbol of the council currently. She's part of the leadership structure of the progressive majority of the city council. And also her, the question of if she is reelected or not is probably the difference of if there may be a veto-proof majority on the council or not, or even the ability to assemble a veto override on the council. And in that respect, it's like a pivot point for the balance of power in the city. And, all eyes were on Ward 10 last Saturday. There were other conventions happening that day, Ward 9, Ward 11, but the decisions of those conventions could be pretty easily predicted if you were paying attention to the states of those races. And in the case of Ward 10, if you just look based on the sub-caucus of the delegates who were elected on caucus night, it looked very evenly split. And that brought a lot of attention. And there are groups like We Love Minneapolis, for example, who had invested a lot of time and energy into this race and turning people out to caucus, in training delegates, having a presence at the convention, in addition to and on top of the efforts of the candidates themselves.
DSA is the big boogeyman in Minneapolis right now. Do you have any thoughts on that? I go to conventions and I get handed DSA attack flyers. Does that explain some of the anger? Do you think the negativity is on the rise? I thought since we elected a progressive council majority in 2023, I'm thinking maybe 2021 was just going to be a blip and we would settle down a little bit, but it feels like 2025 is taking it up a notch and I don't know why. And I can't explain it.
There is a sprawling progressive movement in this country, and DSA is just one piece of a very large cross-section of folks who would consider themselves progressives, would see themselves as part of a broader coalition. It's kind of funny because you have organizations like All of Minneapolis who constantly use this term, DSA aligned. And DSA is definitely not the only organization that makes endorsements. And if you look at the endorsements of this quote-unquote DSA-aligned majority on the council, DSA did not endorse all of them, or maybe only half of them. And you could look at Labor Union, or you could look at Outfront Minnesota Political Action. You could look at, there are any number of organizations that are part of a progressive coalition that you could pick out. I guess what is somewhat amusing to me as someone who has had some involvement with DSA over the years is that all of this focus on DSA is voluntarily giving DSA so much more power than they've organically organized for. I mean, it is giving DSA a spotlight and attention and a narrative that frankly, they have not, and maybe some of my friends in the chapter may disagree, but that they have not built and earned on their own. It is, as you point out, John, it's a boogeyman, and it's become a label to slap on anyone who is on the more progressive half of the DFL.
Right. I experienced this I guess I'm never free of Carol Becker, for example, but like when she tried to trademark Wedge Live in, I believe, 2018, so long ago, but it feels like it's never ending and always here with me. That raised my profile, and it made people think, well, if this awful human hates Wedge Live, I've never heard of Wedge Live, but if this awful human hates him so much, he must be my hero, and I am with him forever, and I will stand behind him. I can imagine that happening with the DSA. Like, if these bad people If the evil empire is against DSA and they think the DSA is their enemy, then I must be with DSA.
It's negative polarization.
Yeah.
And we see the same dynamic between the Democratic and Republican parties as well. It's not that I love the party I'm aligned with, but I really hate the other party. And so I will move into and see myself in coalition with the party that's closer to my beliefs, even if I have perhaps some really substantial and fundamental disagreements with that party's platform or its approach to politics. And so that dynamic is also happening within the city of Minneapolis as a one-party town, where there are going to be differences in opinion. You know, there's lots of split votes on the city council, although not as many as I think some commentators portray it to be. And that's the coalition that's been drawn kind of on either side of the divide, and we can point to different organizations on either half of that have a more prominent role, but they're not the only ones. And it does give a lot of narrative power to focus all the attention on just one piece of a coalition and really elevate them as the dominant force on that half of politics. I do want to go back to Ward 10 a bit and things at the convention, because I didn't finish telling you about this interaction that I had with Steve Prince. After he told me to fuck off, I told him that's unacceptable. You can't treat people like that. You're done. You need to leave. And he refused to leave. He went over to his seat behind a row of women, and he kept refusing to leave. I kept telling him, you need to leave. I got other folks, the other sergeants at arms, who backed me up. Folks on Lydia Millard's campaign also backed me up on it. They agreed that was unacceptable. Oh, yes. And in the case of all the delegates who were kicked out of the Ward 10 convention, or at least that including the one we attempted to kick out, the Millard campaign was in agreement that that kind of behavior is unacceptable. And, and it's not in their interest to have delegates who support their campaign behaving that way. And the thing is, there are alternates. There are alternates available to upgrade and take the place of the delegate. So why not exchange for someone who is willing to behave themselves if someone is crossing a line? And Steve refused to leave. We had some other volunteers at the convention who kept trying to work on him and say, you need to go. And then at one point, I had asked the two women in the row to leave. The third woman in the row was his wife, and she stood up at one point and she grabbed me with both of her hands. Which is that you can't touch people. You just can't. And Steve kept saying, I'm bullying him, I'm harassing him, talking loudly. I think trying to create a narrative around the people in the minds of the people around him that he was a victim in the situation rather than the belligerent person in that situation. And this was kind of a culmination of some tension I'd seen from Steve over a couple of weeks, actually, because I convened the precinct caucus in precinct 10-1, the same precinct that you live in, of course. Right. And he was a challenging caucus participant back in April. He was kind of berating me at times and trying to steamroll me. And I needed to make sure that things were being done right. Yes, it took a long time for those goofy spiral notebooks to get everyone to fill them out. We had a very large, I think 74 delegates in Precinct 1 in the 10th Ward. And most alternate slots were filled as well. So it took time. And Steve also served on the Credentials Committee. And at our first meeting of the Credentials Committee, I was the convener of that. The first item of business we took up was electing chairs or co-chairs of the committee. And myself and Christopher Mose volunteered to serve as co-chairs. And there were no other volunteers. And so we held a voice vote on electing us. And everyone audibly voted yes, and Steve audibly voted no on electing the two people who volunteered to shepherd this committee through its work. And I don't know why someone would vote no on electing committee leadership. He didn't offer or volunteer or express any interest in leading the committee. And so it sort of felt like just this kind of it was queued up to be oppositional and defiant, and it kind of broke loose at the convention that night or that afternoon.
I don't know if you know this, but he used to run the 10-1 caucus going back, I don't know how long, probably before I moved to the Wedge. He was running caucuses, convening in 10-1.
He told me a little bit about the work he'd done, particularly on the Kerry campaign in 2004, that he and his wife had done to really get a lot of folks turned out, vouching for voters who had a hard time proving their residency in the precinct. So, I got to say, like that kind of stuff, that commitment long term is something I respect. And you don't have to like someone or even really get along with them well to respect their contributions towards our democracy. But his behavior on caucus night at the convention, it got to a point where it was unacceptable. And, I don't know what else I could have done in that situation.
There's nothing he could have done. He's been an asshole going back for as long as I've lived in the Wedge. He just has been that guy, whether it's a neighborhood association meeting, like he hated Lisa Bender, just a big Tut Hill guy going way back, and just is resentful that for the past decade plus, he's been on the outs politically and is not getting his way, and he's just real mad about it. And so he's going to be an asshole. There's a lot of people, I don't understand why they live here, because they seem to hate everything about the city and resent everything. And you did nothing to deserve what Steve Prince did to you, because he does it to everyone. It's just who he is.
Yeah, and he, like I mentioned before, he has an imposing stature. I do wonder if there are people who have a hard time or feel intimidated and don't say no to him when he's out of line. And when someone pushes boundaries and they're able to keep pushing them without being pushed back firmly, it can be probably pretty jarring when someone is so firm in saying that this is unacceptable. And I do wonder if that was just and I wanted to try to get into someone's head, but if that was just kind of the psychology of the situation and why he reacted the way he did. I'm just glad the convention ended without anyone getting hurt, that the police weren't called. We didn't have to call any ambulances. And the good news is that the building, the person with MPS, who was our main point of contact, he said, "We're welcome back at any time." And I consider that a success for the DFL.
Well, after 2023, I was hearing rumors that we were never coming back ever again.
I am shocked that they let us back, but I think it was perhaps a lack of communication internally on the side of Minneapolis Public Schools that we were approved to use Ella Baker School for the Ward 10 convention again. And I'm just really glad that we were, despite, the tension and needing to eject a few people, that we still, we managed to have a convention where folks were, no one got hurt. There maybe were hurt feelings, but that, while people may not have been happy about the outcome, I think genuinely for either candidate, they really wanted their preferred candidate to be endorsed. What I hope everyone could walk away with is saying the process was fair, legitimate. I had every opportunity to make my voice heard. I didn't get the outcome I wanted, but it was a fair arena for competition. And as a DFL party official, that's our job, is to put on a process. We're not there to engineer any kind of outcome or force an endorsement. We're there to create a fair process. And in that respect, I think we did a fairly good job at the Ward 10 convention. And I'm really grateful also to the other volunteers who made the day work. And hopefully This is a good trend for Minneapolis DFL, and as we get to the city convention in July, there may be some tension. Yeah, there may be a few people who are behaving out of line, but I hope we can have a convention with integrity where, like I said, everyone feels that they have an opportunity to be heard.
Well, thank you, Samuel Doten, for helping put on these conventions where everyone has such a miserable time. No fun is had. They're awful. Everyone hates them.
You not having fun, John?
I'm having fun, but I understand what a sick, sad person I am, that I enjoy.
Yeah, we're all sickos here at Minneapolis DFL.
I kind of, it's a little bit of a social event because when you know people and they know you, it's fun. But I try to put myself in the position of someone who's showing up and has no idea who anyone else is and is like, who are these mean, terrible people? It can be a miserable experience, I think.
They're your neighbors. That's who they are. They're your neighbors.
Yes. They're
people who live on your block, across your alley, 2 blocks over. They're the people you see when you're walking your dog and they're in their front garden. You wave and say, hey. It's that person from the convention.
And then when I'm biking home from like the convention in Ward 7, for example, and I'm biking past the normal people who are out in their yard, I'm like, maybe these people should make decisions for us. The people who are just out in their yard having a good time. Let's do a convention where we do a random selection of people who are out in their yard on a Saturday and see what their preference is.
You might be onto something there.
Okay. Well, conventions in somebody's yard is what I'm saying. Okay. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you, Samuel Doten. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.